Some of y'all woke up since Bible class, because that was a little more than what was responding in Bible class this morning, so I'm grateful for that. The bad news is, as was previously mentioned, we don't have a projector today, which means you're going to have to do a lot of following along in your notes and in your Bibles. The good news is last time I taught this lesson was at a VBS, and I was asked to teach it again today, and I taught it without a projector, so I should know how to do it. The other bad news, however, is that last time that I taught it took me 1 hour to get through it. But the good news is that y'all can just get up and leave if I go an hour. So, no, we shouldn't take that long this morning, but I'd encourage us to open to the book of Joshua. This morning we're going to be looking at some very important transitional moments in Israel's history. And specifically we're going to look at the moment in which the people of Israel are going to get a new leader. They're going to possess a new land. They're going to cross over into new journeys and new paths, face new adversaries, but also learn new lessons. And beginning in Joshua chapter 1, we'll notice in verse 1, it says, "Now after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord, it came to pass that the Lord spoke unto Joshua the son of Nun, Moses' assistant, saying, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise, go over this Jordan, and you and all this people to the land which I am giving unto them, the children of Israel. Every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given unto you, as I said unto Moses. For the wilderness and this Lebanon, as far as the great river Euphrates, and the land of the Hittites, and of the great sea toward the going down of the sun, shall be your territory. No man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not leave you nor forsake you. Be strong and of good courage. For to this people you shall divide as an inheritance the land which I swore to their fathers to give unto them. Only be strong and very courageous, that you may observe and do according to all the law which Moses my servant commanded you. Do not turn from the right hand or to the left, that you may prosper wherever you go. This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate in it day and night. And you shall observe and do according to all that is written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will have good success. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and of good courage. Do not be afraid, nor be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go." I mentioned that they're in a transitionary period. If you'll notice in verse 1, it tells us what that transition is. We're transitioning from one leader, Moses, into this new leader, Joshua. Now there's a great deal of differences between the two. Joshua is a very militant leader. He's more of a general, if you will. And this is very good and very important and very strong for the people of Israel. However, you have to remember, they're transitioning out of a period in which their leader was more of a shepherd. Less of a general, more of a shepherd. And the guidance of a shepherd and the guidance of a general are quite different. Where Moses would be guiding them along the way and directing them, Joshua would do more commanding. And it was necessary for Joshua to take this position because they were going to have to overcome several adversaries. And so it was important for Joshua to be this militant or this powerful, strong general. However, this transition of power takes place in a very special way. You'll notice that he is given some commands and given some reminders as well. He is commanded that he is to be like Moses in some ways, but is warned against being like Moses in others. If you'll remember, or if you'll recall from these first 9 verses, he's given commandments to hold tighter, to grasp onto tightly this word, not to stray from it to the right or to the left, but to do so fervently, to follow after this word. He says, even so that if you do these things, your way will be prosperous. The things that you do will be given unto you, or the things that you want will be given unto you. The land in which has been promised to be given unto you, which was first given to you under the commandment of Moses, will be granted unto you. But it must be the case that the people of Israel are to listen and to examine the Word of God diligently and to follow after it to the best of their abilities. And now this position is placed upon Joshua. This position is placed upon Joshua. And this task is given unto him. If you'll notice that last phrase there in verse 9, he says, "Have I not commanded you to be strong and of good courage? Do not be afraid nor be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go." Now remember, this is Joshua. This is Israel. These are those who would have been taught of and those who would have witnessed the power of God throughout their lives. He guided them by pillars. He parted waters. He defeated enemies that should have defeated them. And all of these things he did so that they could see his power. So when he says, do not be afraid, do not be dismayed, do not fear at all. Why? Because he is with them. He's encouraging them in this transition of power. And you'll notice as you look throughout history, a transition of power is normally a weaker point within a nation. It's normally a part where you're trying to figure things out a little bit. And so for there to be any transition of power is a scary thing. Yet one of the very first things that Joshua is to do as their new leader is to lead them in a militant way towards the defeat of the city of Jericho. We'll get to that in just a little bit. Maybe, potentially. I don't know. If not, we'll get to it throughout the rest of this month because we're going to focus on the book of Joshua for the whole month of July, with the exception of next week. But you'll notice there's this transition of power. But you'll also notice if you flip over to chapter 2, beginning in verse 9, you'll see that there's going to be some spies who are sent. And I'm not ignoring verses 10 and following, 10 through 18. We're going to get back to that here in just a little bit because that's going to be important. But if you'll notice, there's this transition of power. Now there's a transition of peril that is going to occur in Joshua chapter 2. We'll begin in verse 1. It says, Now Joshua the son of Nun sent 2 men of Acacia Grove to spy out secretly. Go and view the land, especially Jericho. So they went and came to the house of the harlot named Rahab and lodged there. And it was told that the king of Israel, I don't know where that came from, the king of Jericho, saying, Behold, men have come here tonight from the children of Israel to search out the country. So the king of Jericho sent to Rahab, saying, Bring out the men who have come to you, who have entered into your house, for they have come to search out all of the country. And the woman took the 2 men and hid them. So she said, Yes, the men came to me, but I did not know where they were. And it happened as the gate was being shut, when it was dark, that the men went out. And where the men went, I do not know. Pursue them quickly, for you may overtake them. But she had brought them up to the roof and hidden them with the stalks of flax, which she had laid in order on the roof. And then the men pursued them on the road to Jordan, to the fords. As soon as those who pursued them had gone out, they shut the gate. Now therefore they lay down. She came up to them upon the roof. And she said unto the men, I know that the Lord has given you the land, that the terror of you has fallen on us, and that all the inhabitants of the land are faint-hearted because of you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea. For when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the kings of the Amorites, and to those who were on the other side of the Jordan, Sidon and Og, whom you utterly destroyed. And as soon as we heard these things, our hearts melted. Neither did they remain any more courage in anyone because of you. For the Lord your God, He is the God of heaven and of earth and on earth beneath. You'll notice that in this instance with Rahab is called upon to welcome in these spies. And she does so in a way in which she protects these men's lives. But there's a reason behind it. If you'll notice, as they begin to wonder why did Rahab do this thing, the thing that she brings to mind is she says, we've heard of all that you have done. We have heard of how the Lord collapsed the Red Sea upon the Egyptians, how He delivered you out of the hands of the Egyptians, how you killed the kings of the Amorites, how you took over Saigon and Og, and how you have had all these enemies delivered into your hands. And we've also heard the word that we're next, that we are the next nation that is going to be in opposition of you. But yet we know from what your God has done that He is both the true God and that He will deliver us into your hands. The reason why she has delivered these people, these spies, out of the hands of her own people is because she believes in the true God of Israel. She believes in His power. She believes in His might. She also believes in His promises. Why? Well, because she knows that what is promised to Israel is the land that she is possessing, is the land that she is a part of. So she says, we are fearful. We are afraid. Why? Our hearts are melted. There is no more courage left in anyone else because of you. For the Lord your God, He is the God of heaven and on earth. Notice also in verse 19 of Joshua chapter 2, which says, So it shall be that whoever goes outside the doors, this was read for us just a moment ago, of your house and into the street, his blood shall be on his own head, and we will be guiltless, and whoever is with you in the house, his blood shall be on our head, if a hand is laid upon him. This is the promise that is uttered by the spies, that is uttered or repeated to her. and told to her that if anyone steps outside of your house, they will perish just like the rest of Jericho. But if they stay within your house, they're safe. They're protected. Why? Because of her faithfulness in God. So she shows faithfulness in God and understanding that He is going to deliver this city of Jericho unto them, unto the hands of the Israelites. And because of that faithfulness, her family is spared. Now here's the interesting part about the book of Joshua. We are going to talk a little bit this month about the fall of Jericho. When we think of the book of Joshua, the fall of Jericho is probably one of those highest peaks, if you will, of looking at these wonderful and magnificent stories or accounts that we can see in the book of Joshua. However, it's probably one of the most boring things that you can see in this book, because there's so much other stuff that when you really dive into the text, it's beautiful. Now, we like it because it's easy for us to remember, and we even talk about it in our Bible classes. We talk about the marching around, the blowing of the trumpets, the screaming, the walls falling down, the people of Israel charging in without ever having to do any sort of siege work against the walls themselves. They collapse because of the power of God. And that's all wonderful and that's all important. We're going to study those things. However, there's so much more to this book of Joshua. There's so much left that is in here that if we're not careful, we will overlook these things. I want you to notice a few things with me. Open, if you will, or actually just pause here because we're going to get back here. If you want to open, you're more than welcome to Matthew chapter 1, to Hebrews chapter 11, and to Ruth chapter 4. I want us to notice that this is not the only time that we're going to see this Rahab. Matthew 1, Hebrews 11, Ruth chapter 4. Rahab, I need to remind you of something. Rahab is not an Israelite. Rahab is not a Jew. She's not of the tribes of Israel. She is not one of the promised descendants of Abraham. But notice when you turn to Matthew chapter 1, you'll notice that this Rahab is present in the genealogy of Jesus, in the account of his descendants. Verse 5 says, Salmon begat Boaz, notice this, by Rahab. Boaz begat Obed, by Ruth. Obed begat Jesse, and Jesse begat, notice this, David the king. Remember, David, pillar of the Israelite and the Jewish belief system. The king of Israel came from a direct descendant of this Rahab, this woman who was in the city of Jericho who delivered these spies. And you'll notice another familiar name that is mentioned, which we'll get to in just a second after we look at Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 31. Hebrews 11:31, commonly known as the Hall of Fame of Faith, a book specifically written to a Jewish audience about faith in Jesus the Christ. And in chapter 11, verse 31, which the chapter itself is an account of all of these Jewish people, Abraham, Solomon, David, all these wonderful pillars of the Jewish faith who are shown in this specific chapter as faithful unto God. In this book that is dedicated to a Jewish audience, you see this name once again. By faith, Rahab did not perish with those who did not believe, for when she had received the spies with peace. So this Gentile woman of no Jewish descent, not a direct descendant of Abraham by birth, is mentioned in a Jewish I also failed to mention Matthew, a book written to the Jewish audience about the life of Jesus. So you got two books that she's mentioning primarily, Matthew and Hebrews in the New Testament, both of which were written to Jewish audiences. She's a Gentile woman. And in both of these instances, they mention either her faith or what her faith provided for the kingdom of God. So this Gentile woman's included within these Jewish writings. You'll notice also that the one who I mentioned, it was important we'd get back to in Matthew chapter 1, verse 5. Notice who her son is, Boaz. Looking at Ruth chapter 4, you remember Boaz was the one who welcomed in both Ruth and Naomi, who showed love and care to Ruth and Naomi. Notice Ruth chapter 4, verses 18 through 22. Now this is the genealogy of Perez. Perez begat Hezron. Hezron begat Ram. Ram begat Amminadab. Amminadab begat Nahshon, and Nahshon begat Salmon, and Salmon begat Boaz, and Boaz begat Obed. Obed begat Jesse, and Jesse begat David. Basically the same account of what we had seen. We just looked at less verses in Matthew chapter 1. The same account of what we had seen in Matthew chapter 1. So you've got this Gentile woman who saved these Jewish spies being included in the genealogies of Jesus, the true Messiah, who was of Jewish descent, written in a genealogy account or a record of his genealogy to an audience that was fully Jewish. And then you turn over to Hebrews, which is a book written to a fully Jewish audience. And then you turn to the book of Ruth, who, of course, would include then, once again, this Boaz, or the Salmon and Boaz, who what we would have seen is the husband, Salmon is, of Rahab, and the mother, and Boaz is the son of Rahab. So when you look at these, when you look at all these instances and put all these things in one thing, Kase, what do you talk about? There's a lot of different places we looked at. There's a whole lot of different confusing places. She's here. She's a Gentile in a Jewish book. And what does that mean to us? What importance does that play to us? You'll notice that because of this woman's faith, she became a direct descendant, in a sense, of Abraham. Something that was previously unheard of. She was welcomed into the Jewish community by Joshua himself, in fact. Well, how do we know that? Well, because we can look at Joshua chapter 3 and Joshua chapter 4, which we'll get to hopefully here in just a little bit. But in those accounts, you'll notice that Joshua makes a decree, makes a proclamation that no one should bring harm to her, and that she should be able to receive and take with her all of the things in which she previously possessed. Now, why is that important? I want us to notice Galatians chapter 2 and verse 20. If you want to jot over there real quick, you can, or you can trust me. I'm going to be reading from Galatians 2:20. It says, I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives within me. And the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by the faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. Rahab's life changed completely the day that she welcomed those spies into her life. We have no indication that her previous place of employment was continued upon by Rahab. In fact, every indication that we have is it is quite the opposite. Her whole family was saved because of her actions. She was written as a Gentile into Jewish literature. And need I remind you that the Old Testament specifically was written to an entirely Jewish audience, written to the Jewish people about the God of the Jews. And this Gentile woman is included within that. Why? Because of her faith in God. It's a very beautiful thing. Why is that also important? Well, if you'll notice, peril was to come upon all that were in Jericho. Pain and suffering was to be had at the end of the sword of the Israelites to all of the people in Jericho, except for the family of Rahab. She removed this pain and suffering. Why? Because of her faith in God. When we look at the actions of Boaz in Ruth, the great amount of love and care that he showed unto Ruth, you have to at some point in your mind begin to realize that these lessons, this love that he had for this woman, and this love that he had for this woman in a time of peril, had to have come from some of these lessons that his mother, Rahab, had instilled within his heart. He had to have remembered of the moments in which he was being raised, in which she would probably have repeated time and time again, of the beauty of the God of Israel who delivered her and her family out of the hands of the Israelites, out of the way of the sword of Israel. Let's keep going a little bit. Let's look at Joshua chapter 3. I told you we're going to get back to verses 10 through 18 here in a second. I'll give you a summarization of 10 through 18. They're told that they are going to cross over the river. They're told that they're going to cross over as his first thing that he is going to do as a leader. Joshua is commanded to take this people of Israel to cross over the river Jordan. And that's where a few of these things come into play here in just a second. But verse 1 of Joshua 3 says, Then Joshua arose early in the morning, and they set out from the acacia grove and came to the Jordan, he and all the children of Israel. They lodged there before they crossed over it. So it was that after 3 days that the officers went through the camp. And they commanded the people, saying, When you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord, and the priests and the Levites bearing it, then you shall set out from your own place and go after it. Yet there shall be a space between you and it, about 2,000 cubits by measure. Do not come near it, that you may know the way by which you must go, for you have not passed this way before. And Joshua said unto the people, Sanctify yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you. Then Joshua spoke to the priests, saying, "Take up the ark of the covenant and cross over the Jordan, and cross over before the people." So they took the ark of the covenant, and they went before the people. And the Lord said unto Joshua, "This day I will begin to exalt you in the sight of Israel, that you may know that I was with Moses, and so I shall be with you. You shall command the priests who bear the ark of the covenant, saying, When you have come to the edge of the water of Jordan, you shall stand in the Jordan." And Joshua said to the people of Israel, "Come here, and hear the words of the Lord your God." So Joshua said, "By this you shall know that the living God is among you, that He was without fail drive out the people before you, the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Hivites, the Perizzites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, the Jebusites." We're in verse 11. "Behold, the ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth is crossing over before you into the Jordan. Now therefore, take for yourselves 12 men from the tribes of Israel, one man from every tribe. And then when it shall come to pass, as soon as the soles of the feet of the priests who bear the ark of the Lord of all the earth, shall rest in the waters of the Jordan, that the waters of the Jordan will be cut off, that the waters shall come down from the upstream, they shall stand as a heap. So it was when the people set out from their camp to cross over the Jordan, with the priests bearing the ark of the covenant before the people. As those who bore the ark came to Jordan, and the feet of the priests who bore the ark dipped into the edge of the water, for the Jordan overflows its bank during the time of harvest. The waters which came down from upstream, they stood still, and rose in a heap very far away from Adam, the city beside Zaratan. So the waters went down into the sea of the Arabah, and the salt sea failed and were cut off, and the people crossed over the opposite of Jordan. Then the priests who bore the ark of the covenant of the Lord stood firm on dry ground in the midst of the Jordan, and all Israel crossed over on dry ground until the people had crossed completely over the Jordan. You can also look at Joshua chapter 9, verses 19 through 24. There's a call here for them to cross over, and that's exactly what they do. And there's also a call for them to place these memorial stones, a way in which, as the generations would see these stones time and time again, they could walk over the Jordan, they could show them the stones, they could remind them of what God had done in this moment. But here's where things get a little bit important. They're not just removing them from one side of the Jordan into the next, delivering them further towards this land that was promised, delivering them into the land that God had promised to the forefathers and to Moses, to all of these people. The reason why they left Egypt itself, all of these things were to be given unto the Israelites. All of these things were right in front of them. All these things were within grasp of them. They're finally reaching that moment that was promised unto them. So he says to place memorial stones. But if you'll remember, this is not the first time that Israel was called to cross over a body of water. In fact, the very first thing that Moses did in his position of power was to lead his people across the Red Sea. And how did he do so? On dry ground. And then you also see in Joshua chapter 3 and 4 that the very first thing that Joshua was called to do as he is leading this people is cross over at some body of water, here specifically the Jordan River. And how does he do so? On dry ground. And coincidentally, when you see Jesus enter into the picture, and the first time that we see Jesus as he is about to begin his ministry, begin his leadership, you'll notice that he finds himself right back at this same body of water that the people of Israel passed through under the guidance and leadership of Joshua. In Matthew chapter 3, verses 13 through 17, it says, Jesus came from Galilee to John at the Jordan to baptize him. And John tried to prevent him, saying, I need to be baptized by you, and you are coming unto me. But Jesus answered and said to him, Permit it to be so now, for thus it is fitting for us to fulfill all of righteousness. Then he allowed him. And when he had been baptized, Jesus immediately came up from the water, and behold, the heavens were opened up unto him, and he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove and alighting upon him. And suddenly a voice came from heaven saying, This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. If you'll notice as well, the purpose behind Moses' being able to part the Red Sea and allowing for Israel to cross over this was not just for the purpose of saving Israel. It was for the purpose of showing Israel that God is with Moses. And then when Joshua crosses over the Jordan, it's not just for the purpose of delivering the promise that had already been made unto them, this land of promise, But it was also to show the people of Israel that that God is with Joshua, their leader. And then when Jesus interacts with this same body of water in Matthew chapter 3, as He is baptized, you'll notice the heavens open up, the light shines down upon Him, the Spirit of God descends like a dove upon Jesus, and the words cry out from the heavens, "This is my beloved Son in whom I am well pleased." All of these instances, each of these with Moses, with Joshua, and with Jesus, all these instances are meant not just as a way of salvation of the people, but a way of showing the glorification of God through these people. He is giving them this power. These people are the chosen people that God has decided these people will lead us. Moses, Joshua, and Jesus. Each of these individuals started their ministry, started their leadership with a body of water and with a show of God's power. And each of these people were called upon to do a very important thing. I want us to also notice, just very briefly, you can look at places like Joshua chapter 6. You'll notice there, we're going to go and look at a little bit of the destruction of Jericho, probably tonight. You'll notice in Joshua chapter 6 that they're changing positions now. Notice in Joshua chapter 6, after the destruction of Jericho, or even before the destruction of Jericho, if you will, in verse 2, "And the Lord said to Joshua, See, I have given Jericho into your hands, its kings and its mighty men of valor." You can jump down to verse 3 through 5. It says, "You shall march around the city, you and all your men. You shall go around the city once. This you shall do 6 times. The 7 priests shall bear servants of trumpets of rams' horns before the ark. But the 7th day you shall march around the city 7 times, and the priests shall blow their trumpets. And it shall come to pass, when you make a long blast with the ram's horn, and when you hear the sound of the trumpet, that all the people shall shout with a great shout, and the wall of the city will fall down flat, and the people shall go up every man straight before him." You can also notice down in verses 18 and 19. There's a specific charge that is given. This is very important for a very specific reason. There's a specific charge that is given unto the people of Israel as they go into Jericho. Verse 18 says, "And you by all means abstain from the accursed things, lest you become accursed when you take of the accursed things, and make the camp of Israel a curse and trouble it. But all the silver and gold and the vessels of bronze and iron are consecrated unto the Lord. They shall come into the treasury of the Lord." This same command is given unto all of the people of Israel, that they should not take of the things of great value in their eyes of the people of Jericho. Don't take their gold, their silver, their bronze, their cattle. All these things are meant to be given into temple service, to take care of the things concerning the tabernacle or the temple or the sacrifice and the altar of God. But if you'll notice, there's one person throughout all of Jericho and throughout all of Israel who is allowed to maintain their possessions. You want to guess who that was? Rahab. Because of her faithfulness, she continued to possess her home, she continued to possess her family, and she continued to possess all of her earthly possessions, none of which were taken away from her, none of which were seized because of her actions. You can also notice passages like Matthew chapter 6, verses 19 through 21, where the same command in a similar sense is given unto us, that the things that we value of this earth are not to be valued more than the things which we value in heaven. Don't lay up for ourselves treasures in heaven, treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy, where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, where neither thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. You know, Rahab probably could have sat down and thought about it a little bit and said, well, maybe if I'm faithful, God will show me mercy. Maybe if I do things right, God will show me mercy. But she was a Gentile. She wasn't a part of the promise that was given unto the Jews. She wasn't given the promise of the land in which she was to possess. She wasn't a descendant of Abraham, and yet because of her faithfulness, God, Joshua, and Israel all welcomed this woman who previously lived a life that was not faithful or pleasing in any way, form, or fashion in the sight of God, welcomed her into the community, provided for her, cared for her, saved her life, put her literally in the Bible forever, for us to always be able to look back and see of her faithfulness. And all these things were done because she trusted in the God of Israel. She knew the great power that He possessed. So it didn't matter if it was a transition of power. It did not matter if things were going good or bad or if things were going up or down. Rahab knew to trust in God. And because of that, she was given such a great reward. In just a second, we're going to sing number 319 as an invitation song. We're going to be given an opportunity to show our faith in God, to provide a moment for us to strengthen and comfort one another. Rahab, someone who had seen and witnessed the power of God, seen and heard of the things in which God had done, had faith enough in God to save her and her whole family from peril. And as a result was able to be a part of the Jewish people, a part of the lineage of Jesus, and we ourselves have the same opportunity. We have a chance to save ourselves, to show our faith in God, to save our families from peril, to show them what it means to be a follower of Christ. And we have a chance to be in that same lineage, not before Jesus. We have a way to be a part of the family tree of God after Jesus. We can be one of His children. We can be a part of the family of God. We can be a part of the church. All that it takes is a show of faith in God, a way of proving to ourselves and to those around us and to God that we are fully committed to God. What is that show of faith? Well, it's belief. Having that faith in general. It's repentance. I want to change my mind. It's making a way or a difference in our lives and say, you know what, I want to confess that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God. And I no longer want to live a life that is filled with sin. I want to change. I want to do what is right. I want to follow after the God of Israel, the one true God, the one who delivered unto us the Messiah. The way that I can do that is becoming a part of His family, putting Him on in baptism, washing myself free from my sins, cleansing myself with the blood that He shed upon that cross. I rise to walk in newness of life, a new creature, a new creation, one who is fully cleansed, fully made whole, ready to serve Him in all that I do, always remaining faithful in all that I do. If you're here this morning, you need to put on Christ in baptism. You need to commit your life to being a follower of Him. You need to put aside all the things of this world. Or maybe it's the case you've already done that, but you've gone astray. You've had some moments of weakness, some moments of struggle, some moments of sorrow that have led you astray from the truth. I'd urge you to come back to God. I'd urge you to give us the opportunity to encourage you, to strengthen you, and to bring you back to God together as we stand.